Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 47th Annual Seattle International Film Festival. I'm Beth Barrett, and I am thrilled that you could join us this morning for Build It and They Will Come, a discussion of online film community and what that means, now and especially in the sense of festivals and coming together around great international and independent film. I am thrilled that our panelists were able to join us and take some time on two of their Sundays, one of their early morning Mondays. I'd like to introduce our panelists. First, Gemma Gracewood, the editor-in-chief from Letterboxd, joining us from New Zealand. So good morning, Gemma.
Morning.
Lily Reber, who is the VP of Marketing for Mubi, joining us from New York.
Hello.
And Leela Meadow-Connor, who is the Executive Director of the Film Festival Alliance, joining us from Wichita.
Hey, everyone.
Thank you again so much for spending some time. So we're here to talk about what it means to build an online community, especially in this last year with all the changes that have come from being pandemic based, and all of us in our house. First, I'd love to have all of you, speak a little bit about your organizations and sort of your goals around that kind of community. And Gemma, we'll start with you.
So goals around our community separate of pandemic or including pandemic?
Both, separate, and then if there's a new goal around pandemic.
Yeah, right. I see. Cool. So Letterboxd is the online social network for film lovers. We came into the pandemic with just under 2 million members. We emerged from the pandemic with over 3 million. The idea is at the very heart of Letterboxd is that if you are a film lover who wants to keep track of what you've been watching and what you thought of it, you open the app or jump on the website and you keep a diary of the films you watch. You can then organize them into lists. You can add films that your friends tell you about to your watch list. You can write reviews of those films. You can follow other members, and this is where it starts getting social. You can find other people to follow who either share your taste in film so that you can find people who agree with you to mirror your taste, or you can find people whose writing you love, but whose takes on films are quite different, or you can curate your community in completely different ways. I know that during June last year, I found myself actively seeking out a wider range of voices, especially among Black Letterboxd, who, I was already following a pretty broad range of people as editor because it's useful to my work, but I found myself really digging into who aspects of our community are that we hadn't maybe shone a light on before, which is part of our work, right? And ought to be part of our work before the cops go and kill anyone else. Sorry, I've just taken it there. But yeah, and so a big part of the work we do as at the HQ level is to keep an eye on what our community is thinking about, what they're concerned about, what they're scared about, what they are hoping for, and to respond to that with product features, with editorial, and just with social messaging across our social channels that meets them where they are. And so yeah, definitely in the pandemic, there has been a lot of levels of that to think about. And I think one thing that we're forever relieved and grateful about is that a feature that we'd spent a long time thinking about but not delivering on was around comment controls for members to be able to curate the conversation in their own space. And we finally shipped that just as lockdown happened, which meant that as everybody went into lockdown and went online, and there was a lot of disinformation and I guess toxic thought during the Trump presidency and in a pandemic that some people seem to think was made up, we had given members from the start ways in which to keep their own spaces safe. So that, those are just some of the things that we found ourselves in a good position to do. But have to say, we've been chasing our tails for a year, like I guess most other online networks. Yeah.
Yeah, great. And Lily with Mubi.
Yeah, so in terms of, so the question was goals
Well,
of
just
the
a little bit about like what Mubi is and sort
yeah.
of the goals around community.
Yeah. Okay. So Mubi is a streaming platform first and foremost. We've been around. We actually just celebrated our 14th birthday on February 14th. So we've actually been around for quite a long time. Have been through several, changes in terms of the product and what that looks like. But at the heart of what we've always been is curation. So what really sets Mubi apart from other streaming platforms is the fact that we literally have human beings, and I tell people that I sit next, or I used to sit next to the human beings that are truly choosing each film that we present on the platform. There's just a huge human touch to everything that we do. And in terms of kind of the objectives of the platform, it's really about highlighting a range of different voices, different filmmakers. We're a very filmmaker focused platform in terms of how we present films and how we talk about them and how we curate them. And that spans everything from kind of the classic auteurs, the Fellinis of this world, to new and emerging filmmakers whose work we're really excited about and want to champion. And in addition to kind of the streaming experience, we also do cultivate a community within the platform itself. You can follow other users, you can rate and review films within Mubi, which our users really appreciate. And we also are, we also have a strong social presence on our other social platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, where we build communities there as well, even outside of our own platform. So yeah, it's really about kind of the curation and creating a shared viewing experience. We introduce a new film on the platform every day. And so that kind of film of the day concept allows us to highlight a single title every day, no matter what that film is or who the filmmaker is. It has that same moment in the spotlight. And perhaps, the hope is that, not the hope, we see that we always see the highest views for the film on that day. And so it does kind of create this community and shared viewing experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then Lilo, it's Film Festival Alliance.
I just got my email from Mubi like 2 minutes ago for the movie of the day. I love it. I'm Leila Ahmed O'Connor. I'm the Executive Director of Film Festival Alliance. FFA is a nonprofit organization that exists to support film festivals and the people who run them. Beth happens to be on our board. And so before pandemic, obviously film festivals looked a lot different. We would gather several times a year in person to touch base about really just networking. We provide networking and these professional development opportunities for people who work in this regional sort of, not market film festival industry. And it's just a way for us all to come together. Before FFA existed, we turned 10 last year, which we totally forgot about because we were so busy with the pandemic. Before FFA existed, for so many of us who had been working in the film festival industry for many years before that, we never had these touch points to come together. And it's so important, especially this last year when we, our organization completely transformed, because we spent so much time, literally once a week. We started calls. We started our first weekly Friday call the day that South by Southwest canceled. So we all came together to talk, and we just invited the whole community beyond our membership to come together and like, what's going to happen? Who's going to South by? And people are like, I'm still going. I don't care about this, And literally, we got off the call, and an hour later, they canceled. So from March to August, we held weekly Friday calls with our film festival community. We talked about, we talked to Cleveland, who was one of the first festivals that went online, and they gave us a case study. We talked about drive-ins. We talked about audience engagement, you name it. And sometimes we talked about nothing. It was more like just a group therapy session. So it was really an important way for film festivals to come together last year and figure out how to do exactly what SIF is doing now and go from being a physical community to an online community. And it's really interesting how different festivals have done it and how successful they've been. And I'm hopeful that, in 2022, we're looking at going back to being together and celebrating film together in person. So yeah, that's what a Film Festival Alliance is.
Awesome, which is actually the perfect segue. And Dustin has put it in the chat, but if anyone listening has questions, if you just want to throw them in the Q&A section, that would be great, and we'll get we'll get answers to them as we can. So one of the things that is, I think, central to all three organizations is the idea of curation, and like independent curation, or in the case of festivals, curation and movie. Now you're sort of in that gray zone in between independent and, because you're moving into sort of theatrical. So Gemma, Letterboxd is actually focused on that kind of curation and how individuals can find a home with other cinephiles, taking sort of the beginner or starter cinephile and encouraging them to dig deeper. And so how within the structure do you encourage that kind of community? Is, just how do you build that community from like a beginner, like, well, I saw Parasite because somebody told me I should. How do you take that person and then introduce them to the rest of the cinephile world?
I mean, the thing about Letterboxd is it is user led. So even our editorial level is 1% of what the content on Letterboxd is. The rest is user created. So in a lot of ways, it's us watching what members who have been around a bit longer, or who just have a bit more of a handle on the tools are doing, and taking clues from them. A year ago, we introduced an editorial feature called How I Letterboxed, because we were curious to talk to some members who are doing different things, maybe creating more interesting lists, or maybe they'd worked out how to find followers in a way that was really, really deliberate, because we try not to fall back on AI. We get asked for recommendation engines all the time. The point is, we don't want a computer to tell you what you want to watch next, what you should watch next. We want other people, other film lovers, to tell you that. So, short answer rather than rambling answer to that specific question is our members find their own way through. But the way that that might happen is if you have just watched Twilight and joined Letterboxd to log your 366 watches of Twilight, which really happened last year, and we love that member. She's awesome. But what was interesting about her diary was that every other film was not mainstream, not a blockbuster, and generally from pre-1950. So there's someone who's using Letterboxd in a really interesting way, where she's doing one very public exercise which could make you see her film taste in a specific light. And she's young, but then if you are following her for her Twilight content because you are also into Twilight, what you're also seeing her watch is all these classic films, really, really interesting deep dives into the history of film. And so there's sort of influence there. I mean, that's just a single example of how it works. You come for the Twilight content, you stay for the pre-1950s deep dive reviews that she's doing of all these other films. And I think that would be the simplest way to describe how the community works in terms of pulling people through from a popular movie into a whole lot of others. We also, as Lily said, we definitely curate our social channels to ensure that we are pointing members to not just what's been released this week, but also what you might have missed, and from the archives, but also from what else has been released this week. We really, really do pay attention to the smaller indie releases. We look back at our best of South by 2019, for example, and look at that list and go through it and go, well, only 3 of these films were released. Where are the other 7 that we said we loved 2 years ago? Hunt around for them, find out their release dates, work with the publicists to wrap some editorial around it. So yeah, there is a bit of editorial work, but I think more than that, and the absolute pleasure of being an active Letterboxd member is watching what your friends are doing. Your friends being the people you've chosen to follow, who may or may not be friends in real life, or may not be your fiance in real life, in the case of Isabel Sandoval, who, oh my God, tweeted on Valentine's Day that she met her fiance on Letterboxd. And I'm like, everybody's always asking us for DMs, and frankly, you don't need them because Isabel managed to do it.
Wow.
Well, I mean, there is that thought that, for so the, the curator, this, is in their ivory tower and the gatekeeper, and, framing that curatorial slate in everybody, in every single person is, I mean, it's incredible. Every person is a curator. And that's, that's definitely something that that I think we'll talk about in a little bit. But Lily, I wanted to ask you, because it feels like Mubi takes that sort of everyone's a curator, that step farther, and providing access to those actual films, those like kind of deep dive films, to say, okay, so now you've gone a step beyond Twilight. Now, how do you actually watch some of those films? And I know that you're moving into more theatrical and more support for international titles. And so I'd love to hear how sort of Mubi fits into that that structure.
Yeah, I mean, I think really similar to what Gemma talked about, it's a matter of finding that way to bring people in and then use that as kind of a trail of breadcrumbs, if you will, to introduce them to, going deeper into the, films they may not have heard of, and kind of the more different types of filmmakers. And a lot of the films that we show on the platform, our curators have literally gone to film festivals, whether in person or virtually, and chosen films that aren't likely to get theatrical distribution, and we premiere those first on the platform. And in some cases, as you mentioned, Beth, we're now doing our own theatrical distribution in both the UK and the US, and soon in Turkey, and we actually just had our first release in Mexico and Colombia, which was really exciting. So we're doing more to bring films to cinemas as well. But yeah, I think, for us, the kind of way that we help make the experience more accessible and user-friendly and welcoming is through, every film that we show on Mubi has a synopsis, as all films do, but we also include something we call an our take, which is the perspective of our curators of where we found this film, why we're showing this film, why should you care about this film, what's great about this film. And I think that really is kind of a hallmark of how we make the experience more accessible and make people more comfortable kind of discovering and taking a risk with a film that they may otherwise, they haven't heard of the filmmaker, or they've never seen a film from Lithuania before, but we help kind of guide through that experience.
Yeah. And Leela, like, festivals have often held that sort of gateway drug. It's that festival is the place that you're going to see that film from Lithuania because somebody you work with told you, oh no, you have to go to the festival and you see these things. How do you see the role of festivals in the building of the cinephile that then allows them to sort of blossom?
Yeah, you're so right. And I think one of the things I was thinking about with both Letterboxd and Mubi is, that human touch that you both talked about and the human element of it. And that's, I think, why film festivals are so important, is that, like, it's an algorithm free, set of movies that we're putting in front of you to watch. They've been selected by human beings that your audience trusts. And, I think having that personal touch is really, really important. And that's why festivals are so successful. And Beth, you mentioned about building the cinephile. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, like you said, film festivals are sort of the entry point for a lot of people to sit, like, especially when you're in person and you're like, oh, okay, like, I'm just gonna go see this movie because it fits into my schedule. And it just totally opens up a whole world of cinema for people that they would never ever have been exposed to. So I'm hopeful that the online experience for people with film festivals is similar in that, like, this looks interesting, I'm going to click on this. And it's a totally different thing because you're going to maybe click on something and watch 10 minutes of it and then be like, but it's also like you're in control of what you watch. It's not Netflix or Hulu telling you like this, so you might like this. It's actually it's taking that whole, like, curatorial thing to a whole nother level, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, the notion of curator. And there's a question in the chat that that the communities in art house have historically been pretty pale and pretty male. And so what have been some of the successful ways of engaging and bringing more diverse audiences into the online spaces? I don't know who wants to. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because every time I have a question about this or something comes up in a current affairs sense that we need to address, the answer is always in the Letterboxd community. So, you know, one of the best examples of that was last June when we were about to do a podcast on, I think, Studio Ghibli movies, which are wonderful and we all love them, but it felt more urgent to address what was going on in the United States at that point. So I thought, well, who within the Letterboxd community do we have who could speak to the power of film and films told by Black filmmakers, like from the perspective of who is really concerning, you know, and at risk here, and found a wonderful member who is just, you know, a guy with a day job, not just anything, but not a film curator, not you know, a mainstream critic or anything, just a dude who lives in Pennsylvania, who has been on Letterboxd for about 6 years and had been quietly curating the most comprehensive lists of films about the Black experience. So not just by Black filmmakers, but specifically about the spectrum of the Black experience, and then sub-curating lists under different genres. And so I contacted him. I was like, Adam, you know, would you feel up to talking about this? Recognizing there's emotional labor inherent in being asked to represent at this point. He was like, hell yeah, I've been quietly doing this for years. I would love to talk about, you know, what I've seen in all of these films and what they've meant to me, which is brilliant. And then the wonderful Tasha Robertson from Polygon went and picked him up to do a longer written piece for them. And so, I mean, that's just one very simple example of how it works at our end, which is that the members have almost always done it. And if they haven't, then we do. So, for example, you know, one of the things we've noticed a lot over the last year is members taking, because they've had the time and have been housebound, taking the time to try and complete a bunch of our bigger film lists. So say the top 250, which is the 250 highest rated films on Letterboxd, which is your Parasites and your Godfathers and, you know, lots of male directed and, you know, written films. And the year before that, we realized that there are just no women in this list and won't be for a long time. So we curated the top 100 highest rated female directed films of all time. And that was an editorial decision, and then wrapped an essay around that, and, you know, really looked into the stats and took a sort of deeper look at these films on their own, separate from the man list. And we are doing that more and more. I mean, it's tricky doing top one. I mean, award ceremonies are tricky. What are we actually awarding? But at the same time, it is a chance to put crew approved lists in front of members to get them to look at things in a different way. And then, you know, we take that list of the top 100 highest rated films by women and we put it on our list challenge page so that it's widely available to all members and they can take it as a challenge, and they have. So, you know, there is a certain level where we have to do the work. And yeah.
I mean, there's a curatorial responsibility. Lily, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's similarly. I mean, it's obviously it's been interesting to see how this conversation has really intensified, and how, you know, how many people are, you know, discussing diversity in film and the importance of, you know, showcasing different voices. And it's been, you know, particularly over the past year, it's been amazing to see how our community has come out, and in various different ways, whether it's through emails or through social. They're asking where, you know, please point me to where can I find LGBTQ films? You know, where can I find Black films? There, people are really actively taking initiative to seek out these different voices. And they're coming to us because this really inherently has been something in terms of showcasing diversity of different voices and experiences has always been a core part of what we've done. I mean, Mubi is available globally, and our curatorial staff is equally as international. And I think no two no two members are probably from the same country. So we have a lot of different perspectives of, how people are viewing the films and the lens through which they're making these selections. And there is kind of this dialogue that's more active now, which I think has been really exciting, through social media and through our community, of how people are expressing what they want to see and the voices they want to hear more from, and we're able to respond to that. And it's been really exciting. But I think, the sheer nature of the fact that we're showing films from all over the world, whether it's, the United States and the United Kingdom, or, Bhutan, we recently had had a film. So it really is very much central to our platform to highlight different experiences and different voices. And yeah, it's been exciting to see how audiences have been responding even differently to that over the past year.
Yeah, and it's so interesting when our community will call us out as well.
Yeah.
And so we've had a habit of we're going to talk about film festivals, but I have to say, one of the fantastic things about the pandemic and the move to online film festivals has been that more of our team can attend, and we can cover more movies and we can cover more filmmakers, which means that we can cover more voices. We have, I guess, because we are similarly to Lily and to Mubi, we have a really wide, inclusive, democratic approach to who we want to cover. We also are a company that's headquartered in New Zealand, where we have a very much a bicultural base built on the Treaty of Waitangi with our Indigenous population. And so it sort of feels natural to make acknowledgements of country at the beginning of our Twitter threads, for example, when we're covering certain festivals. But having said that, it doesn't matter where that comes from. What it looks like to Indigenous film writers out in the world is an empty acknowledgement, because it's not followed up by anything. So, hey, we've got an Indigenous editor now, and he's just covered the Kin Theory panel at the Seattle International Film Festival for a piece that he's writing at the moment about Indigenous cinema in 2021. And he also has already done some Sundance, Berlinale and South by Southwest coverage for us, and behind the scenes, fed in and gone, look, this is the reaction this film is getting on Letterboxd, but what those, I guess, white members don't understand about the Indigenous lens of this film is this, and I would love us to consider it, for the best of, for this reason. And that's important, that's why we're all here, right? And that's why why we love movies.
I'm glad you brought up the access point, Gemma, because it's not, for the industry folks, like I can attend SIFF this year, which is so great, but also for audiences, and I think as we figure out like how film festivals are going to incorporate their online programming going forward, it's not a competition about audiences. It's about sharing and building audiences of film lovers, and how do we do that together? And so I think that that's something that we'll be really looking at over the next, 12 months, as we go forward. One of the things we talk a lot about in the Alliance is diversifying those decision makers and those programmers and those voices, and elevating those diverse voices as programmers and as trusted curators of film for your audience. I think it'd be a great idea for festivals to look to Letterboxd for film, for programmers and screeners. I think that you have such a diverse audience, and I love that about Letterboxd. And I think like there are new ways that we can start looking at programming.
Well, and that's an interesting thought, to look beyond this sort of traditional gatekeeper concept and almost crowdsourced programming, which is a kind of an interesting, might be a really interesting way to do maybe like year-round programming, or because I know, with the pandemic change, festivals have expanded, and many festivals are not just doing work in their traditional dates. Like many of them are year-round, and expanding what that looks like in terms of that, and who's responsible for that curation, and who's responsible for building those communities.
It could be really cool to have guest curators from Letterboxd come in and do some year-round programming.
I can. I
I'm
mean,
gonna
we
write
have
that down.
Yeah, we have a lot of professional, film curators on Letterboxd anyway, and I can hear them going a little bit, oh, because it's, it's their job, and I do want to sort of speak in defense of film festival programmers, and that there is a deep difference between, having deep film theory and having the sort of wider access to the film industry that you do have as a curator, versus churning your way through your Letterboxd watch list. But I think you are right in the sense that, there are certain types of data that we look at when we're, making decisions about our editorial coverage, for example. You can see immediately the thoughts about a film out of a festival. I mean, Sundance, Coda, it was such a big news story, the sale of Coda, which is a lovely film, not a 5-star film for me, but a really lovely feel-good film. And frankly, you could see that within 5 minutes of that film ending all over Letterboxd. And if you were making purchase decisions based purely on the exit interviews of Letterboxd members from a film festival screening, then that was, 100% the right purchase decision. But I love our community for the ways in which certain titles shake down. I do want to preserve and protect the incredible and immense knowledge of people who've worked their lives to be film programmers, and I think that there's a happy medium in there. There are things that we find. I interviewed Mirawi Jarima about his film Residue when it dropped on Netflix, and really for the first time came to understand what the LA Rebellion was. But when I went to find LA Rebellion films to watch, it was very, very hard. So there's an opportunity, to bring a new young crowd who are interested in Mirawi's filmmaking back to the LA Rebellion. And, maybe there's a LA Rebellion season on movie in there, for example. Yeah, I don't know. It's something about, a slight sidestep, but I heard a really powerful line when I was watching a panel the other day on, which was a selection of multicultural film marketers who talked about, it's about reaching the audiences who count, not counting the audiences you reach. And that's just kind of lodged in my brain really firmly in terms of just backing up decisions that I might make editorial about covering a tiny indie film over a blockbuster, or covering them both in the same week. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's interesting because this last year has really seen an almost democratization, especially across festivals, because there was the market festivals like a Sundance or something like that, and there's the audience festivals. But the response that the audiences have at a market festival is so very, very different than the responses people will have at an audience festival. And you used Coda as a good example. In terms of sales, how do you democratize that across, and what do you look at in terms of choosing what to review or what to pick up or what to spend your focus on? And if there is a way that the general audiences across the spectrum can have as much say as someone who has the privilege to be able to be in Park City, to be in the exact screening that was the right screening. Because I took right from the movie page, just because it's popular doesn't mean it's good. And taking that sort of, how do we find those good films and then elevate them to the level of the popular films?
Yeah, I would say just quickly that that our director of social has a lot to do with that from our end. You know, Aaron watches widely and broadly, and we all do, but he has a way of honing in on an aspect of a film that that will, based on what we know of viewer activity and Letterboxd community activity, will pierce their hearts. And I mean, I'm thinking of just one new example, Together, which is coming up. Really sweet film, Ed Helms, but it's Patty Harrison, and you can see it already. If you read, I think 98% of the Letterboxd reviews all mention Patty Harrison, and you go, okay, well, that's the angle for this, you know, little indie film. That's if marketing are paying attention, it's all right there. You know, not to get sort of crude and turn out into marketing, but we're, you know, hey, that's part of the business. Yeah. I know that's just
well, and it's a huge way that community is built, because you have to choose the marketing. Like, you have to choose your focus in terms of like, how do you use what's in front of you to reach out to communities, and where do you choose to spend that energy?
And sometimes you don't know until that first audience tells you. I mean, I think, sorry.
Oh,
I
no,
just
go
think
ahead.
a lot about I think a lot about Ammonite, which I loved, and which which I don't think has had its I think Portrait of a Lady on Fire coming a year before Ammonite was tricky, very tricky in terms of marketing, and yeah, I don't know what I'm not a head of marketing at any point, but I think that film needed a different conversation around it to really land where it needed to.
Yeah, I think, I mean, in terms of, you know, the question of elevating good films to the level of popular one, I mean, it's hard to say, because to some degree, you know, popular films are popular for a reason, because, you know, they're, you know, often for the masses. But I think what's really exciting and interesting about what's happening now is that, you know, the definition of, you know, how you can reach a critical mass of popularity is changing a lot with the way the internet works today. And, you know, you find these, you know, groups of huge super fans for, you know, filmmakers like Celine Sciamma and Bong Joon-ho, that, like, you know, even despite, you know, his recent success, I don't know if like every average American would know his name, but like people are, you know, die-hard fans. And there's these communities that are being created across the internet, on, you know, film Twitter, and on Letterboxd, of course, and on Mubi. And it's allowing a different type of popularity that can grow and on its own organically and become something quite big, even if it's small on the scale of, you know, the world as a whole. There's still this huge fan base out there, and when you can bring people together virtually in different ways, it creates a new type of critical mass that can support and spread the word about great films.
Yeah, the audience that counts.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hey, I just want to say I'm excited to see in the chat that you can learn more about the LA Rebellion through UCLA. So that is, you know, that's not a film website I would have naturally hit. So it's really exciting to learn more, and they've got some apparently fantastic stuff there. So that's exciting to me. Yeah. Sorry, Leila.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say how important I think film festivals are in, you know, uplifting those films as well. And I think that for their audiences, and especially thinking about like this collaboration and audience growing that will come from, you know, film festivals moving to online and finding a home there, it will be really beneficial for these filmmakers too.
Yeah, you know, you think of, and I'm just curious if, and it really does kind of come out of this last year of this pandemic year, where we all went, you know, immediately to Netflix. We all went immediately online to see as many films as we could possibly, you know, consume all of that content, because we were kind of trapped in our houses. That has made curators out of all of us. But, you know, you think about, you know, the film nerd, and redefining what that means, what that film nerd is. It's like, and I think, festivals and Letterboxd and Mubi, there's this whole new world of people who do a deep dive on Bong Joon-ho because Parasite was super popular, and they're like, oh, and they kind of like work through it. And those people are not, they're not the white male college film nerd type. And so those new communities are popping out, and then they go to festivals, and then they take that next step. And I'm wondering, yes, Megan, that was Megan all summer long was creating a film nerd out of it. Have you seen the pandemic change any of your models of operating? Like, did because people were suddenly like going there with it, did it change anything? Did it change the way that you approached anything?
Yes, just quickly for us, a few of the, and I've noticed this with other platforms as well, is that features that, you have a feature calendar that you develop towards, and features that we had planned to deliver at possibly another time, we delivered because of exactly that. So we have an integration with Just Watch, which means that you, especially depending on your pro or patron tier of membership, you can select your preferred services, so iTunes, Netflix, Mubi, Criterion, and then when you're searching for a film that you want to watch, you can immediately see what platform it's available on. So that was very basic going into the pandemic. During the year, we developed the ability to get notifications when a film on your watch list lands on one of your services, which is so exciting. Like, there are days I'll wake up and I'll get an email about a movie, and I'm like, why did I want to know that? And realize that I put it on my watch list 3 years ago because someone important to me said, you need to see this. And there it is, and I can watch it that day. So that's a really simple example of a feature that is just 100% necessary and effective.
Yeah.
I think for us, how we've seen a lot of change. I mean, this was initiated by us, and we've seen the resulting change from our users. But some people might know that prior to last May, we had the same curation, the same philosophy, but it was at any given time we had 30 films available on the platform. At any point in time, a new one would come every day, as it still does, but then the oldest one would leave. And so a lot of the value proposition was about this kind of limited selection. And last May, for many reasons, primarily unrelated to the pandemic, and primarily because of the fact that we had the ability to show titles that, because of the limitations of the 30-day model, we were unable to present on the platform. And, we wanted to be able to give the opportunity for people to see all of the films that we had available. And so we expanded our library. We opened up, and, we now have hundreds and hundreds of films available wherever you are, still with the same curation and still with a new film every day. But what we've seen is that in the beginning, people were still very much sticking to the new ones introduced to the platform. So, the most recent 7 to 10 films that we'd introduced, people were still gravitating towards those. And increasingly more so, after months and months of lockdowns and, people spending more time at home and spending more time exploring film in a deeper way, we're seeing people really become more adventurous in how they look at the library and, doing a deep, we have, for example, a special right now on a journey into Indian cinema. And we're seeing users who are watching every single one of those films and just kind of going deep into that area, or a retrospective on Almodovar, and we see users watch every single film in that series. And so that type of systematic dedication to exploring film, we've definitely seen more of since the pandemic started. And then the other thing is that we've used it as an opportunity, like in the absence of being able to do public screenings and theatrical releases that we would have done in the past. We started doing more virtual events We've created kind of a mechanism on the platform where we can offer free previews for 24 hours where people can come in and watch a title completely for free and create kind of a more of a community viewing experience around a release, which has been really exciting for us as well.
Yeah. And Leila, this kind of ties into a question in the Q&A in terms of the change the pandemic has had on festivals, incorporating drive-ins, and how did or doesn't that build community when your car is close to another car, which is kind of like being close to another human.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before I touch on that, I just want to say, like you mentioned, Beth, earlier, how film festivals are changing now because of the virtual aspect. There's this opportunity to do more year-round programming, and to take those deeper dives and to build those communities and to like partner with like a Mubi and offer your audience, a free trial of Mubi and let them take that deep dive, which is really cool. And yeah, for the drive-in, I think a lot of festivals have been doing that. They started doing that last summer. And I personally love it. I mean, I hadn't been to a drive-in in so many years. And I actually also run a micro cinema here, and we hosted the Sundance Film Festival here in Wichita at the Starlight Drive-In. And it was fantastic. Like thinking about Coda, it's again, like just one of those audience pleasing films. And so sitting in my car, my friend was parked right next to me, and I don't want to give anything away, but she was sobbing, and I was like sitting there feeling emotional. It's just like one of that kind of movie, but it really did create community. And it was really cool. And like, so not just like the resurgence of like that kind of cinema viewing, but also just like being able to, have those emotions with somebody and you're looking at them through a glass window. So I think that like it really did add another human element to how film festivals are going to, and probably, are going to evolve going forward.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for, even though it's not exactly the same as literally sitting next to someone in a theater, going there and knowing that you're watching the film at the same time as people that are surrounding you. I think, it's still there. I mean, for better or for worse, when you watch, virtually at home on your couch, you do feel, you're watching by yourself. And I think with the drive-ins, even though there is glass and metal between you and the person beside you, you still feel kind of this specialness of the event and that people are watching with you, which I think is really cool.
It's something about that big screen too.
Yeah.
And you just can't take away that experience.
That's totally true. We have a really interesting question here about responsibilities and obligations to the content creators. For instance, what do you say to a filmmaker who may have spent a tidy sum on platform requirements or applications, but has yet to be accepted by, to a festival or to a popular platform? What role do we all have, and what obligations, do we feel to those creators in the same way that we feel to our audiences?
I can speak to that from the Alliance point of view. So one of the things that we're really working on is trying to figure out like filmmaker and artists like compensation and how that works in the film festival industry, because for a long time there's been no compensation for filmmakers. And we know that as the film festivals, we are not sustainable without filmmakers. And so we have to figure out a way that, and again, I will say that like 99% of the festivals that are part of the Alliance are nonprofits. So, it's those submission fees that you're paying, they're keeping the lights on and opening those venue doors. It's not like the festivals are getting rich from submission fees. But we are we're focusing a lot of our work this year on just that. We're partnering with Dear Producer to do a filmmaker compensation survey. So we'll share that data when we get it. But we're really asking like, what value do you provide to filmmakers when you're screening their films, and what of monetary value? Because we want to know how we can make this. I think the pandemic has really shown that that there are different ways to do things. You don't just have to fly the filmmaker out and put them up in a hotel. Like, you could split the box office revenue with them. You could provide data to them. So there are lots of other ways that we're looking at how film festivals can be supportive of filmmakers.
Yeah, and I think for us, we have a very dedicated effort towards showcasing first-time filmmakers' work. We have a whole strand of our platform called Debuts, and a lot of our, all rights theatrical releases as well have been from first-time filmmakers. And as much as, of course, we want to complement that with the work of filmmakers people might have heard of and auteurs, we are extremely motivated by the opportunity to be the platform to premiere a filmmaker's work for the first time. And that's more exciting to us than anything. And I think that kind of dedicated effort because that's often the most difficult part is, your very first film getting that visibility. And like, for example, Chloe Zhao, who of course now is, top of everybody's list, everyone talking about her, just won another award today. Her first film, Songs My Brothers Taught Me, was actually really barely seen and almost not released anywhere. We're hosting a global premiere of that film this weekend, actually, almost across the entire world, for people to have the opportunity to see her first feature, which is obviously different thing. But I think, it's so important to give filmmakers that first opportunity to have a platform to showcase their voices. And we really do make a dedicated effort to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important because we're all in we're in an infrastructure and a circular cycle. It's, none of us exist without filmmakers, and films don't exist without audiences to see them. And audiences don't exist without figuring out a way to see them, either through a festival or through a recommendation engine or through online. So it's like every point is so necessary, and that circular thing that is actually the community building that we have to do, is we have to support and build all three of those different communities, because we can't exist without each other.
Yeah, and we do have responsibilities I see myself as having a responsibility as an editor to help guide people at the beginnings of their careers in how to get platforms like ours to pay attention. So, a very small example of that is we've just put up an exclusive clip from Sam and Matty Make a Zombie Movie, which is a tiny but totally joyful documentary about the making of very silly zombie movie by two best friends who are also neurodiverse, have Down syndrome, and they're the brother of one of them and his best friend, who are total pro DOPs from New York, traveled up to Providence, Rhode Island on their weekends to help these two best friends make a movie. And it's the sweetest documentary, but it's just got VOD this week. It's the team working on it is very small. They dropped into my inbox, what can you do? And I was like, do you have an exclusive clip? I've watched the movie, I love that bit with the librarian, can we have that? And that's how we can help you get the word out. And they went, can you do that? Oh yeah, we can do that. We own the rights to the movie, we can do that. And I mean, it seems very basic from a publicity angle, but it's not that basic if you haven't done it before. So it's, at a very day-to-day level, it's about taking the moment to, I'm aware of the fact that I do that, but I also don't even answer, let alone say no to another 35 emails, because there are so many and life is so busy. I get that. But it's about trying to use our powers for good wherever we can, and in whatever small ways we can.
I think the pandemic has showed us that we are a very nimble industry, and we are very good at finding ways to be innovative. And somebody asked about in the Q&A about virtual screenings, and I think one thing that festivals have always done very well is eventize their films. You're showing The Big Lebowski and you're having White Russians or whatever. That's just a basic example, but festivals have always done that. And I think that they're now translating that to the online experience. So I think that that's very helpful for festivals, whereas cinemas, they didn't do that before. And I think that they're like, oh, now we have to eventize things. And I think that, adding those extra elements, whether it's a Q&A or a panel or something, is really important to frame those films.
Yeah, I think that Q&A is such a good point, because for me, growing up and, when I started going to film festivals and in college, and for me, that was just added such a layer of complexity and another dimension to the experience. And it was something that could only happen at a festival, really, is being there and hearing the director speak after and hearing their perspective on the film and why they made it. And, it's very rare that doesn't make you like the film more. It's very rare that would ever take away from your experience of the film. Almost 9 times out of 10, it's going to make you appreciate that film more, understand that film more, want to recommend that film to others more, because you really heard the voice of the creator behind it. And I've been very excited by the degree to which we, as well as so many other platforms, have been able to bring those experiences and make that more accessible than having to actually be there in person to see the filmmaker. We've been doing a lot of, for example, Instagram lives with filmmakers of films that we have on the platform. And we've been really excited by those turnouts of people, who really want to hear that voice, and, attaching Q&As to the films as well. But it is a really special aspect of the film festival that I think is really beneficial to the whole ecosystem, that we're able to make that more accessible for people.
And I think there's a
Yeah.
role for established filmmakers, senior filmmakers as well, to bring people up with them. And there's something that we have started doing much more often when we're interviewing known filmmakers, is not just because we do a lot of interviews called Life in Film, where we want to know their taste in film, all of the films that have been deeply influential to them. And you do end up getting a lot of the same titles. You get some gems, but you get a lot of the same titles. And so we force them, we go, okay, what should we watch next? And who is a new filmmaker you have your eye on? We force them to give us the answers, because it elevates more filmmakers up.
Well, and all of that serves just to create and support the community that has been built up around that. And, when you're absolutely right, Lily, a Q&A almost never decreases your star rating, or says, oh no, I'm not going to add that to my Letterboxd list, or no, I'm not going to tell anybody about. Like, those interactions almost always increase and make you feel part of that film community, because that's you're present as a human being. You're present to have that conversation, and I think it benefits all of us. The more of those interactions, and especially thinking about opening year-round cinemas again. How do we treat year-round cinema in festival ways? How do we think about how to keep those communities engaged, even if we're playing the same film 5 times a day for the next 5 weeks? Is it a virtual engagement? Is it having a recorded Q&A on the website? Is it, how do you add something new to that? And then how do you encourage the audience to take it that much step further, to add it to their Letterboxd list, to look, tell people around the country, oh, I saw this film, look for it when, you're out at another festival, or, oh, I love this filmmaker, maybe I should look at the movie thing, and maybe there's more on there. Like, how do we make that next step?
And how do you make your Q&A different and special from the Q&A at the art house cinema in the next town over? And I think a lot of that goes back to the representation of programmers and chairs and moderators and MCs, and the decisions you make around that. I see more and more in the conference world, for example, when someone is invited to be a speaker and they see that the rest of the panel is also all white and male, they're like, I'm sorry, I can't. Until you do something about the rest of this panel. And I feel that way, about a lot of the in-person festivals I've attended, both here and in the States, where I see the same moderator over and over and over. And in some ways, it's because that moderator has some celebrity themselves, but I know what I'm going to get from the filmmaker. It's like, I'd love to hear somebody with a different perspective on life ask this filmmaker all about the many, many years that went into making this film. And, ask male filmmakers what role their family played in helping or holding back from making the film, for example.
Mhm. Yeah, I want to be conscious of everyone's time. We're now officially 1 minute over, but this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you, all three of you, Gemma, Leela, and Lily, for taking time out, and thanks for the folks watching, and just thank you for all of the work that you do around film and filmmakers, and making sure that this ecosystem is as wide and accepting and diverse as possible.
Thank you. It's always so nice to have the opportunity to connect.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Awesome.
Watch
Thanks,
more
everyone. Have a
everyone.
great Sunday.
Happy
Thank
Fifth.
you.
Thank you.